This podcast is brought to you by our merch affiliate. All merch as well as this podcast can be found on theliesdead.com. Link in the description. Thanks for listening. Welcome to the Lie is Dead Recovery Podcast. I'm Matt.
I'm Sam, and we're two people in long-term recovery.
Which means for us that we haven't found it necessary to take a drink or a drug to deal with life on life's terms for quite some time now. This podcast is mostly focused on recovery from the disease of addiction.
Whether that's alcoholism or drug addiction or sex addiction or however it applies to you.
Right. And although we found our recovery in 12-step fellowships, and if you're familiar with 12-step fellowships, you know that according to their traditions, they're not supposed to be any like promotion, and remaining anonymous is a big deal. And anonymity meaning that us two sticking out and saying, "Hey, we're a part of these fellowships," isn't saying, "Hey, we're the poster people for these fellowships." It's more of like, this is where we got a recovery. We just kind of want to talk about it because we're just as liable to our character defects as any other addict.
And speaking of character defects, they will probably come up a lot as topics, or rather their counterparts being spiritual principles, are probably going to be talked about a lot as topics. Other topics might be things like, for people who are having trouble staying clean, or have loved ones that are having trouble staying clean, or, people just struggling to live life on life's terms with, regular people fucking problems.
Right, yeah, absolutely. And also, really to have like some guests on here, people that are in recovery, people that might still be new in recovery, or family members of recovering addicts, recovering alcoholics, or whatever recovery you're in. And then obviously like male on male interviews, because for some reason that just gets a little deeper, female on female interviews, and then maybe like a group round table with a mix of the sexes in order to get a different perspective,
Yeah, lots of different perspectives on one topic.
Right, yeah.
That's fine. I like being in groups because it's, as long as they're small groups, I think it's still really intimate, and like a lot more, information and experience can be shared at one time rather than just getting our two perspectives on whatever the topic may be.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and this podcast is made by a community of addicts for everyone, for people that are in recovery, for addicts out there still using, people new in recovery, people deep in recovery, families, husbands, sisters, wives, children, cousins, who you name it. If you look in your life, you'd be surprised who you find out who is touched by the disease of addiction.
And that really is what we want to build on. We want to build a community of people who have this giant thing in common, because it affects a lot of lives and it affects them very deeply, and we want to hear from you guys about it. We want to hear what you're struggling with and what you need to hear about, or what you want to hear about, or whatever. We really want you guys to get involved as well.
Well, and I think the most important thing too here is that like this is fun. I'm a big podcast fan. I've been listening to podcasts for years, ever since before I even got clean. And I've always wanted to do one. I've always kicked around the idea. So why not talk about something that literally is the most important thing in my life?
And honestly, you like to hear yourself talk.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing we should touch on, the ego. The ego. That's something that me personally, at least, I'm going to have to work on, like trying to keep this out, because this isn't about me. It's not about her. It's not about us producing it. It's about really carrying a message of like experience. Like, this is what we did to stay clean. This is what we did in these circumstances. These are these other people's experience,
right. And that's all we can speak from is our experience, and try and share a little hope for people who are new, and maybe gain some experience from people who are seasoned in recovery, because it's about us sharing with you and you sharing with us and you guys sharing with each other.
Right.
And I think it's important to keep in mind that all the sharing we're doing is out of love.
Yeah, out of love. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that being said, we would love to hear from you. Like, comment, subscribe to our YouTube page. All their other social media outlets will be in links in the description. Feel free to reach out to us. We can talk to you individually, like through messages or whatever. Answer your questions on the podcast. Bring up topics on the podcast. Maybe even eventually have some like call-ins from the podcast.
That'd be neat. Yeah.
And don't limit the questions to just recovery. mean, if you just want to know where we're from or, what our lives are like, feel free to ask. We love talking about off-topic stuff. I'm kind of known for doing that.
Yep.
So, yeah.
I think that covers it.
Yeah, I think that's all we got.
So keep coming back, guys. We'd love to hear from you.